Counselors, turn the mics on, turn them on. Make sure they're close enough. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Oh.
I wonder if it's a minister from the church.
Brian, right?
Bill.
Bill, sorry. It starts with a B.
Brian.
This is always the longest 2 minutes. Everybody's quiet and then we wait and we wait and we wait.
We talk about that every time.
I know it. So we shouldn't start turning our mics on until about 30 seconds before the time.
Yes.
We have Zooming. Oh, Josh, Josh is on Zoom. Josh is on Zoom.
Call the meeting to order. Do you have the roll call, Richard? All right, and we'll have Pastor Ron Harris from Pacific Community Church will be leading us in the invocation. If you'll please stand.
Father in heaven, I just thank you for everyone who's here. Thank you that they're willing to take some time out of their schedule. A lot more commitment than that, and many, Lord, time away from here, working, preparing, thinking, dreaming even about what is to happen with us in the city. And we thank you for everyone like that, Lord. We thank you that they are a gift to this community, and I pray that you'll bless them, really bless them for being here and for their work. And Lord, we pray that you would grant us guiding from you, Lord, because we need it. Lord, we thank you for this beautiful place we live. Help us to be wise stewards of what you've given us. Help us to be compassionate members of this community, and help us to be always thinking of how we can help one another. Thank you for your presence with us. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance led by our Council President, Madeline Seymour.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the Volunteer of the Month. Harv's going to make that presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, councilors. This recognition we have been doing for so many years, and I recall Matt Winkle was on our board of directors at the time, and he kind of said, well, we're going to run out of volunteers of the month. I said, no, Matt, this whole town runs on volunteers. And in fact, I think the very second one that we recognized is in the audience tonight.
I think he is.
Mr. Pro. Once again, we're going to recognize somebody from the museum. And museum, it's easy to find the volunteers there because we've got one of the top-notch museums in the state. And I think we all agree with that. Donna Mason is our volunteer of the month.
Come on up, Donna, come on up.
Go on up, Donna. They're gonna get your picture too, so.
Comes Madeline.
Yeah, we talked about the museum and how it's recognized as one of the top ones in the state as far as history museums are concerned. Well, when you look at the exhibits and one of the persons who really make sure that they're top notch and stay top notch is Donna. As well as you look at the building, how well it's kept. Again, Donna has played a major role in making that happen. But she does so many other things at the museum. When you look at their board of directors, she has sat in that role. On the other hand, she sat at the very front desk greeting people as they come in. If you talk about taking the show on the road, oftentimes that's the person that's taking that lead. And in the last few months, when there was a vacancy on to lead that board of directors, well, guess who stepped up? Donna Mason is our volunteer of the month. Donna, we'd like to provide you with this plaque
Beautiful.
that
And
recognizes
our good
that.
orange.
Yes. And our good friends at Winter River Books have contributed
Oh, thank
a
you.
gift certificate.
Goodness,
So
thank you.
Hey, turn around, you guys, so
Okay.
she can get a picture.
Will do.
Want to change your smile? Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Donna Mason, our volunteer of the month.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the hearing on the mobile food court ordinance. Dana, do you want to give us the staff report?
Sure. I think you have the script in front of you if you want to open the public hearing.
Okay. I now declare this public hearing open at 7:05 PM, this 12th day of September. This is an official public hearing before the City Council of City of Bandon for a code text amendment to Title 17 of the Bandon Municipal Code to allow mobile food units. A copy of the minutes of this hearing will be in the city offices. What does the staff have to report?
Perfect, thanks. So I've got a brief presentation for you. Next slide. Just wanted to go through what we've done so far. So we started this project a while ago. We did a number of work sessions first, but we did submit our PAPA notice on February 17th. The Planning Commission held 2 public hearings. We then did a work session with the City Council last month to ultimately have our public hearing this month. If you can go to the next slide. So we've got 2 things in this code. We've got a mobile food unit, which is just the sort of one single truck. And then we also have the mobile food unit pod. Those are sort of defined differently in here. A mobile food unit you can get through just a type 1 application. You just have to meet all of the criteria. They're clear and objective. Type 2 allows a little bit more discretion to determine whether or not they meet the requirements of all the other zones, like our commercial design standards and signs. You can go to the next slide. Some of the things that we've included in the code for you are related to these things up here that we heard a lot about. So in particular, these food units can't impede any sort of pedestrian or traffic lanes. They can't be anywhere unsafe. They can't occupy more than 15% of a required off-street parking area because we do know they'll be likely parking in parking lots. They have to be fully movable, so we can't have some dead, beat up truck just sitting there, never leaving. It has to actually be able to operate and leave. And we did take care of trash. They each have to have at least 1 trash receptacle provided, and they are responsible for all of their own trash. They have to be self-contained. They cannot, if they're a single unit, they can't connect into water and sewer. There is an allowance for a water and sewer connection if you create a mobile food unit pod, but at that point you'd be looking at a larger development. They have to just be self-contained, and I believe that's also a state law. All the accessory structures that come with it would have to meet all of our existing code. So we've sort of relied on code that's already in place. So our floodplain ordinance, the underlying zone, the commercial design standards and signage for that. The signage has to be permanently affixed, no sandwich boards or portable signs. Outdoor lighting, if they don't already have any sort of outdoor lighting, they'd have to provide that. We've also asked that permitted hours of operation be consistent with their host business, or that they set different hours of operation. Like if you're a pod, you'd have your own set hours. We've allowed mobile food unit pods to include things like restrooms, storage buildings, outdoor seating areas, trash enclosures. And again, provided that they meet all of those commercial design standards we already have in place. They have to meet the pods would have to meet the parking requirement for an existing commercial business. And then how we've set it up to operate each year is that they'd have to submit for an operating permit that would be renewed annually. So with that, we'd be checking to make sure they have all their proper licensing that they need from Coos Health and Wellness, that they're carrying insurance, and that they're still parking or maintaining their food cart in good standing order. The permit is personal to the person and not to the food cart itself, so it can't be transferred to a different food cart. We've also created an exemption for food carts that are mobile food units that are operated as part of a special event or as part of the farmer's market. They can sort of get a one-time approval for things like the Cranberry Festival. They wouldn't have to go through this bigger process. We also put in here that the city council has the right to repeal or amend this chapter and thereby terminate or modify all MFU operations on private property at any time, and included a reference to our compliance chapter to make sure that if anything happens or goes wrong, we have the ability to enforce our compliance chapter. We also made findings that I handed out to you. Sorry, they were not in the packet, but about conformance with our comprehensive plan. So in particular, our comprehensive plan changes need to address the need for the city to promote the health of the economy by encouraging development types that are compatible with city infrastructure, service provision capabilities, environment, and the community's high standard for qualities of life. I pulled out some of our policies that we had just to make sure we're covering these. So one is tourism, guard the scenic appeal and character abandoned by careful development of tourist facilities. Meet the economic needs of Bandon in the face of a declining economic base by diversifying the city's economy wherever possible, and maintain a well-balanced social community by encouraging industry that will attract youth. I thought those were also kind of funny that they were in our comprehensive plan, but we find that the addition of mobile food units embraces and supports those policies in our plan. So prior to doing all this work, Dan put out a survey online too, just generally about this. And these are just a couple of things that we pulled. Our results were overwhelmingly positive. We were really impressed by those survey results. And you can see the bottom is called a word cloud. So it takes all of the things that were submitted as part of the many comments that we received and puts the words in different sizes based on how many times they were said. So, you know, we heard options, we heard great, we heard variety. There's a lot up there. Not to say that we didn't get any negative comments, but I would say at least the online survey we felt was overwhelmingly positive. I think it was 90% were in favor of it. Next slide. There you go. We did at our the Planning Commission's public hearing, we did hear some maybe more critical feedback. There was some concern about locating them in Old Town and sort of competing with the heavy brick and mortar businesses and the existing tourism facilities along the waterfront. We also heard a lot of concern about sort of covering that fair share. So if a brick and mortar business is paying system development charges and you know, zoning compliance fees, they wanted food carts to sort of pay for their proportion as well. There was a concern about needed parking, and that was prior to the city's new parking lot. But certainly that's where we've added in that provision for only allowing it to take up 15% of required parking. And then a lot of people said, we like them, we just want to make sure we're seeing reasonable regulations to control where they're being located. So ultimately, from our initial draft to now, we haven't made many changes other than to remove the allowance for them in the C1, which is Old Town, and C3 Marine Commercial, and only allow them in C2, which is the general commercial, primarily along Highway 101, and light industrial, which is along Highway 101, and then a little bit on 11th Street. In the map on the side, that's the light purple and the light yellow. Everything else was excluded. It's really not that much that's excluded when you take out the C1 and C3. So our recommendation, or the planning commission recommended approval of the ordinance. They could not come to a decision at the time about where they should be located. So they sort of passed that one on to you to determine. Staff thinks that it's easy to just kind of cut out C1 and C3 at this point and revisit it later. And so there's a potential motion up there for you, but if you have any questions for me, let me know.
Okay. Do we have anyone on Zoom that is? Do you know if we have anyone on Zoom? Okay, the nature of the hearing, the rules, and the general conduct. This hearing is to be orderly and courteous. When it becomes your turn to testify, please state your name and address for the record. You will be given 3 minutes to share your comments. Please be mindful of your time. For those of you on a computer to provide public comment, click on the raise hand feature in the webinar controls. This will notify city staff that you have raised your hand and you would like to speak. City staff will unmute your microphone when it is your turn to provide public comment. A prompt will appear to confirm that you would like to be unmuted. Once you accept the prompt, you will have 3 minutes to provide public comment. Once your public comment has ended, you will be muted again. If you're calling in by phone, dial *9. This will notify city staff that you have raised your hand for public comment. City staff will unmute your microphone when it is your turn to provide public comment. You will hear you are unmuted, and then you will have 3 minutes to provide public comment. Once your public comment has ended, you will be muted again. So I will open the hearing, and of course, anyone in the audience, you will just raise your hand if you wish to speak, but because these rules also pertain to you. So do we have anyone who wishes to address it? No one on Zoom? Anyone in the audience? Yeah, that makes it easy. I think we'll close the public hearing and we'll have deliberations.
Dana, I have a question on Coos Health. Do
Yeah.
you know if they, I'm assuming, they all have to be inspected and everything else. Do they issue a license for these people to operate? And if so, how long is it? Do they have to renew it like every year or anything?
Ooh, that's a good question. So they do have to go through a license. I included in here for you the Oregon Health Authority Mobile Food Unit Operation Guide. And the first thing in here is a license is required. So it lets you know that you have to have, Oregon law requires that all food services activities open to the public must be licensed prior to operation. I will try to look in here quickly to see if it says how long it's good for, but my guess is it's a year.
I didn't find it,
No
so,
permit. I can find out.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, do I hear a motion or any other question?
Yeah, I got a quick.
Oh, yes.
What about possibly limiting the size of them?
The size?
Yeah, are we fine with 20, 30, 40? Should we maybe
Yeah, that's
think about,
interesting.
That's a good question.
Yeah, very good.
starting?
I've never seen a 40-foot food truck, but it's a possibility.
No, I meant like 40 different ones.
Oh, 40.
Oh,
Oh, you
yeah.
mean for a
One of
food
the
pod?
number of-
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, maybe start off like give it a trial run at, 10, whatever, a number. But if we just open it up to anything, obviously, possibly you could have 20 or 30 of them out there.
I'm a little less concerned about that. That occurred to me as well, but I think the market will probably take care of that. If these food trucks, hypothetically, if there's 12 in town and they're dividing a market share, food truck market share, it's, survival of the fittest sort of concept, I think. I'm not necessarily concerned with it.
Do you guys have any?
Sorry. I'll lean forward.
The only thought would be, looking at other communities that allow them, you don't see many. I think it's available space is probably as much of an issue as,
Available space?
as anything else.
Okay,
I think one of the good things about this is that it really is because the lack of permanent commitment to the property, the lack of change, it's not hard, can be hard for the city to change these rules. If we became overwhelmed, it would be relatively easy for us to limit it in some fashion.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other
Um,
questions?
The first thing that fast food companies look at, but we don't have very many fast food restaurants in Banner or drive-throughs. They look at traffic counts.
Mhm.
Bannon just doesn't have the traffic counts to justify, 20 or 30 food trucks to be here at any given time.
Right.
I don't think it's an issue. I really don't.
When you talk, you guys need to both get your mics down because I imagine you have a hard time picking you up. I can tell.
Sorry about that.
That's a good point. Anybody else have a comment?
I do agree with excluding C1 and C3 zones.
Oh, I do too. I do too.
So I do agree with that. I don't think they should be in Old Town.
So it sounds like we're not discussing any kind of amendment to the proposed ordinance.
Mm-mm.
Well,
Madam Mayor, I move to
Yes.
approve the land use ordinance as proposed for the zone text amendment to chapter 17.104 supplementary provisions of the Bannon Municipal Code and direct staff to prepare an ordinance and findings for adoption at the next meeting.
Second. Been moved by Peter, seconded by Jerry.
I want to clarify that this does exclude C1 and C3, correct, Dana? Okay. Sorry.
All right, those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, the next item is item 5.2.1 wildlife feeding ordinance. Dan?
Madam Mayor, councilors, we're just bringing this forward to discuss it, and then we can come back as we just did with food carts for an ordinance for adoption. We have draft language here. If the council recalls, the issues come up with wildlife feeding, particularly birds, seagulls, and pigeons, the damage that they cause to adjacent properties, the health concerns, all of those sorts of things. And what the council has done in the past is our code provides a catch-all provision for other things to be defined as nuisances by the council. We did that with a resolution. There have been some challenges to the specific wording of the resolution. So what we have for you now is an ordinance, proposed ordinance that clarifies some of those definitional issues, broadens the definition, limits the number of loopholes that crafty lawyers can try to squeeze their clients through. And I think having it in an ordinance that's in our code really better informs the public as to what is and is not allowed, as opposed to a resolution that they would have to look up.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
So you would come back then with an ordinance?
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
you can see what we've done basically is feeding all wild animals is declared a nuisance. Songbirds are an exemption. We define wild animal very broadly. We define attractant fairly broadly as well. Obviously, songbird feeding in a container that's designed to keep other animals out is okay. We've taken this from many of the changes have come from the city of Cannon Beach. Their wildlife feeding ordinance which was actually aimed at opossums and raccoons that
Oh,
were feeding that
okay.
were causing problems in Cannon Beach, but this would include birds.
Okay,
Yes.
so this doesn't require a
No.
motion?
No, it's just
Information.
really just, if there were any concerns from the council, we could address them now. Otherwise, we can come back for an ordinance in passable form later.
Okay, the next one is 5.3.1, resolution number 2218, authorizing expansion. It should say enterprise zone.
Enterprise zone,
Mhm.
apologize, that's my mistake. It's
Yeah,
not an opportunity.
it might sound like an opportunity, but
Oh,
all
correct.
right, somebody's going to provide us some background there.
So Brandy Medeiros from CCD will come up and give you a little bit of background as what enterprise zones are and kind of how we got to this point.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Brandy Medeiros. I'm the Community Development Director at CCD Business Development. I have Sean Gibbs here with me from South Coast Development Council. So enterprise zones is a state program. It's an incentive to bring in new business for eligible businesses like manufacturing, production. I'm sorry, I'm not real good at public speaking. So the enterprise zone, and I was trying to dig up some history on the Coke Hill Valley Enterprise Zone specifically, pardon me. So originally, your Coke Hill Valley Enterprise Zone was designated in 1986. You guys have had an enterprise zone for a very long time. CCD Business Development was appointed your enterprise zone manager in 1998. And I've been with CCD since 2011. And since I've been here, I've learned a little bit. You have actually gone through about 3 boundary amendments, and the last thing you guys did was the 2019 redesignation. So every 10 years, the zone sunsets by statute. So you have to go through the process, and this involves all the sponsors. So anytime there's a change to the zone, all the sponsors have to agree, and it's done through resolution conversations. The conversation was initiated by Sean Gibbs. And I'll let him tell you a little bit about how that came to be. But we initiated the process, reached out to the zone sponsor. There was support from the sponsors to move forward with amending the zone and adding properties. So right now, through your redesignation, you currently have 9.4 square miles in your enterprise zone. You are allowed up to 15 square miles. With the additional properties that are being proposed, it's adding 1.09 square miles, bringing your total to 10.5. So you still have lots of room for future development. And I think it's important to remember the enterprise zones don't abate land. They don't abate anything but new buildings, new structures, equipment, machinery, heavy affixed machinery. So they're eligible business firms, and they're eligible properties that are abatable. So I just kind of wanted to bring that to you, give you a little bit of background. If you had any questions, you could always call me, or Business Oregon also has a very user-friendly website. If you just Google the Business Oregon Enterprise Zones, you can look up the different programs there's a couple different programs. The standard is the most commonly used, and it provides 3 to 5 years of tax incentives for newly authorized businesses.
Right, so for a golf course, for example, then the tax abatement would not apply to the land, only to the other developments?
Only new development,
Okay.
new structures.
Buildings and structures.
Building, no land.
Okay,
Yeah, and not things like chairs and tables. It would have to be heavy affixed machinery
Correct.
or equipment.
property taxable, ad
Right,
valorem taxable
right.
things. Thank you.
Correct.
Okay.
So
All right, well, I guess I have, maybe Sean can answer this, but I'd like to know who initiated the increase in the size of the Bandon's area.
Yeah, so my name's Sean Gibbs. I'm the Executive Director for the South Coast Development Council. We're a regional economic development organization that serves the southern half of the Oregon coast from Florence to Brookings Harbor. We partner a lot with CCD, and our role is really working on the business development side of helping businesses expand or be competitive, and then helping also bring businesses to the region that kind of create living wage jobs. The reason why we initiated it was our organization that reached out to CCD to initiate a boundary amendment. Was we were in contact with a developer who wanted to look at developing a piece of property that sat right outside the zone. For some reason, there's an industrial site, 9 acres across from the airport, across Highway 101, that sits right outside the zone, right outside the UGB. And that individual was working on a project, interested to see what kind of incentives were available and how we could expand those and go from there.
Oh. So is that where the golf course is being developed?
No,
That's the Oberman site. on
Yeah.
the map.
in your packet, there's a map with kind of where the expansion would go. That's the Oberman location. So we were contacted by some folks that were looking to potentially do some development there that would have been an eligible business,
Okay.
and they were interested in extra incentives, all that kind of conversation.
So in other words, if that person hadn't contacted you in the 11 or so many years that it hasn't been done, you wouldn't have been involved.
Not necessarily. They've been talking to the county and some other folks as well. So they were looking for additional incentives that could have been applied for what they wanted to develop.
Thank you.
Any other questions that I can answer?
It looks from the map like
Yeah.
up here where the Bandon Beach Hotel is going, just that small area was added. Is that correct?
I believe so. In the enterprise zone map expansion area, that location was also added. And then there are some additional lands kind of to the southwest for the most part of the city.
Yeah.
That were also added, that would like to be added to this expansion.
Okay, who asked to have that Bandon Beach Hotel site added?
I'm not sure. Is it Bandon Dunes or
I'm assuming it was abandoned
Yeah.
dunes. I guess that's what I'm trying to get out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so during the process of kind of an enterprise zone expansion, this development, this conversation is a conversation with the sponsors of the zone. So you have the city of Bandon, the port of Bandon, Coquille River, the city of Coquille and the city of Myrtle Point. So it's a large kind of conversation amongst the sponsors. And there's also a process amongst organizations where we reach out to, businesses that aren't exactly in the zone that might be interested in expanding to the zone, all of that as well. So.
Okay, I
So-
see the Oberman site is small here. That's
Yes.
a very small site, but down here below New River Dunes, which is where the golf course is being developed.
Yep.
That is all in red down there. What is that? Why is that added? If a golf course
The
wouldn't
last page.
qualify?
Well, I believe that's additional land owned by Bandon Dunes Golf Resort and
Oh.
as mentioned before, the golf course itself does not qualify for the abatement,
But any of the buildings that they would.
lodge,
share.
that kind of thing. would be
Okay,
qualified.
that's what we're looking for. Okay.
Yeah.
So the abandoned area is the only request you've received to expand the zone.
At this time for the Coquille area, yes, for the Coquille Valley Enterprise Zone.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
And all the other sponsors have signed off on this?
So all the others,
Here, go ahead.
I don't think.
all
they've all
all the other sponsors have shown support. And so far, we've had one of our sponsors pass their resolution. The city of Bandon, you were the next. And as far as your calendar dates and your council meetings
Who
to
was
to
the
consider the
sponsor?
resolution.
Now, is the county part of one of these?
The county is part of that.
Because
and-
Coquille and Myrtle Point, they wouldn't have any,
Objections.
they don't have any objection because that's not
Because
going to impact their revenue.
No, exactly.
yeah,
But the
they-
county would have an impact.
Right, and the county's been involved from the very first step. I reach out to the zone sponsors immediately when I hear of an interest because that tells me whether or not I need to move forward in the next step of the process. So next week, there are four
I
council,
can see that,
Yeah, they haven't,
council meetings.
but it doesn't affect them anyway.
it doesn't affect them basically.
Maybe the next 10 or 15 years, but not right now.
Yeah, and the abatements for a number of years, they don't get like a lifetime abatement. It's 3 to 5 years for qualified property.
Yeah, that-
So
But there are no applications in the Coquille Myrtle Point area.
not right now.
There haven't been in many, many years, at least I think I was on the council
Yeah,
in the eighties when this was first
Face-
instituted.
I think Face Rock was the last authorized business firm.
Okay, in Bandon.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm
Always
trying,
abandoned.
I'm trying to figure out whether this has ever
Okay.
been utilized anywhere outside of Bandon.
No. it
And of
hasn't.
course, we are impacted. So Face Rock Creamery did get a tax break?
They had a standard abatement.
I don't, well,
Which
that's a
is the-
tax break. I don't know that we understood that, but now that they're for sale, so that's,
I think years ago, Hardin Optical was part.
Hardin Optical was one of them, yes.
Was one of
Yeah.
them. They're,
Okay.
they're not in the city.
That was
Right.
years ago. It's different. now.
And I could go back historically if you'd like and just look at the different businesses that have been authorized throughout the years.
Could you
But
do that
I
and
could-
email us?
I could do that, yes.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to table this.
I'll second that.
Can I ask one more question? No, I don't think it's going to be impact, but it's my understanding that these enterprise zones don't dovetail well with urban renewal agencies. And I think our urban renewal district number 2 just covers the city park. It wouldn't affect that Bandon Beach Hotel property, correct?
I'd have to look at the map again. Dana says he thinks it's just the street, so that is probably correct.
Okay, all right.
You want us to talk about the programs? maybe?
why don't, I mean, we may not make a decision tonight and, but we'd like to know a little more about it.
When does the clock start on that 3 to 5 year abatement?
It starts, so if they apply and then they go through an application process, there's a pre-authorization conference with the county. The county decides whether or not they want to approve the eligible activities or non-eligible, they have to decide whether or not it's eligible or ineligible. So the clock starts, so as soon as they're approved, it starts the first year they're placed in service.
Okay.
So if they have a year, they're allowed up to 2 years of construction and then if it goes beyond that, they actually have
Oh,
to
they-
submit an official letter
they
of
could def-
continued interest.
Okay, they get a year deferment on that. So yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it's that first
Well, that's,
year they're placed
you
in
know,
service.
this could be 3 year development on this golf course anyway, so.
Yeah, and in addition, there's also an expanded zone program, which is a four-year program and a 5-year program. And once you get into those longer zones, the sponsors have to actually negotiate with the project based on wages, job creation, investment.
Right.
So there's actually not a real loss of revenue. You kind of hold them to their word for the most part, as far as making that extra investment once they go into a larger zone. So it's something where the standard 3-year is pretty much statute. But once you get past that 3-year program, there's a requirement from the sponsors to really negotiate back and forth to make sure that you're not being shortchanged of tax revenue and that kind of thing for the most part.
That's true for
Yeah. People that actually
developers
have-
that we're not aware of, but
Yeah.
I mean, this hotel and this golf course are going to be built regardless of whether we give them a tax abatement. And we gave it to them once, City of Bannon gave it to them once. We got highly criticized, but they were new and we didn't know. I mean, we were betting on, that they would be successful, and they were successful. They're the largest single taxpayer in the county of over $1 million a year. We understand that. But I guess what I'm saying is the rest of us, the taxing bodies, we don't have a lot of money, and for us to give tax abatement to somebody who we know is going to develop anyway seems like you're slitting your own throat. And I personally am not in favor of that, but I'm willing to listen to I'd like to know more about the whole purpose of expanding the zone.
Yeah, and I'd like to know, like, you're gonna email us about the history.
Yep.
Of the businesses.
I believe there's a motion and second on the table.
Yeah, I'll
I
second.
make a
that.
motion to table it.
And I seconded.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
And we
I
know
didn't
we're
know there was a
discussing it.
second. All those in favor? Oh. Unanimous.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very
for
much.
That
coming.
didn't mean we couldn't hear from them.
Huh?
That didn't mean we couldn't hear a little more from them, did it? That didn't mean we couldn't hear a little more from them.
Dan got the message.
It's not what I have. in
Just
mind.
fast, this is good. for
I
public
thought we could
speaking.
hear from them, but all right,
No, it's fine.
okay,
Okay, Steve, you're in the hot seat.
all right. We'll try to, yeah,
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. It's been a number of years since I've been in
yeah.
front of the council. It's
Yes.
nice to be back. Tonight I'm going to talk about the water master plan. It's originally the first draft was in 2020. I think there was definitely some concern with the first draft as far as the raw water's off-channel storage and the cost of that facility. Since 2020, there's been new developments, and we talk about it in the master plan. I'll cover it tonight during the presentation. I like to have a pointer, but unfortunately, the pointer doesn't work. Well, maybe it does work on the TV. So talk about the deficiencies. Obviously, with deficiencies, that shows a need for why we're recommending improvements. We'll look at projected water demand, which includes water supply, water rights. We're going to talk about the raw water supply issue, water rights update. We have 3 separate priority numbers, and then a financial analysis and recommendations. So a lot of stuff to cover in a short time. I think you have a copy of the master plan. If you have questions as we go, please ask.
Yeah. We haven't
I
read
know.
it.
I know.
Don't expect that we've read it, Steve. We just got it. Yes,
We're charged by
Understand.
pound.
we can barely carry it.
So you can see, sometimes it works. You got the Ferry Creek Reservoir, the Geiger Creek Reservoir. Those 2 feed raw water to the lower pump station that pumps it up to the middle pond. And then from the middle pond, it pumps it up to the water treatment plant.
Okay.
Now, a number of years ago, we added a 3rd pump station, and that's the low water pump station. That pump station allows you to use the water that goes through the fish hatcheries, since they have senior water rights. And the city uses that quite a bit during the summer. They're using it right now. So that's your overall system. And then with the deficiencies, storage is a big issue for raw water. Ferry Creek, Geiger Creek, they're silted in. They don't have a lot of storage. Excuse me. With your raw water pump stations, the low water pump station, actually all 3 of them need flow monitoring, so you know how much is being pumped from each station. It's also a requirement of one of your water rights extensions. There's no emergency power at any of the three stations. The lower pump station needs ventilation. And both the lower and middle pump stations need to have the pump capacity increase to 700 gallons per minute per pump. Your current water treatment plant is sized for 2 million gallons. You can expand it to 4 million gallons. With the pumps being at 700 gallons a minute apiece, that gives you your 2 million gallons. Here's the existing water treatment site. I don't know if I can. Part of the improvements for the 2019 bond issue was to replace one of your raw water clarifiers. The round structure to the left, there's two of them. The furthest one to the left is the newest one. That's the one that's constantly in operation. The older one is the one that needs to be replaced. It's hard to see, but with the control building, there's 4 filter bays. You have filter media in 2 of them. So that gives you your 2 million gallons. You have capacity again to expand for another 2 million gallons.
Right.
And then far left is the 1 million gallon reservoir, and the larger one toward the bottom is the 2 million gallon reservoir. That just shows you the raw water clarifier. You can see 2 of the bays. A couple of years ago, the city did coat the walls of the 2 filters, which improves that you're getting growth on the walls that are affecting the treatment. So by putting the epoxy coating on, it makes it a lot simpler for the crews just to wipe off whatever accumulates there. Pipe gallery, that's below, that feeds that water from the filters feed those pipes. You do have chemicals involved with treatment, coagulation chemicals make particles larger so they settle out. Soda ash to control the pH. You do have chlorine disinfection, but also you have UV disinfection as backup, so. Plant deficiencies, there's no flow meter for the filter to waste line. After a filter becomes clogged, you have to backwash it. That water is not accounted for, so it makes it look like you have higher water losses than you really do.
Oh,
So
okay.
maybe
So-
that's where some.
Oh,
of the-
That's where some of the
Great.
water loss comes from,
Yeah,
because
'cause we can never
we
figure
have
that out.
no idea on the quantity.
Okay.
The filters need to protect it from sunlight because with the sunlight, you get algae growth. Algae growth is not good for filtering. The existing PLC, you can no longer get parts for it, needs to be replaced. You really need a totally new operational system.
And what's the PLC mean?
It's the brains of the plant.
Okay,
It has the programs that run all the equipment.
thank you.
Oh, okay.
The flooring in Sample Island, they need updating. The secondary clarifier needs replacing. And I'll talk more about that later. And then also with emergency power. There's no emergency power at the water treatment plant or pump stations.
Right.
So as far as your treated water storage, you do have a 1 million gallon tank, welded steel and 2 million gallon tank. So you have a total of 3 million gallons. Deficiencies with the 2 million gallon tank, you have corrosion on the inlet and outlet. You're lacking seismic protection. And then also the interior and exterior coatings. Now, last year, November, we bid seismic, to add seismic valves to the 2 million gallon tank and also to coat the interior of the reservoir. We received very good prices. And to help with the project, the city actually had a purchase order for the seismic valve and controller. They signed that purchase order on December 2nd, 2021. We have yet to receive it.
Oh,
And so we had to cancel the project because there's a timeline that the fire chief does not want the reservoirs offline, and we could go to like mid-May.
Yeah.
Well, not knowing when the seismic valve was gonna come, we had to cancel it. So to date, we still do not have the seismic valve or controller. It's supposed to be here next month.
Where are they coming from, Steve?
Actually from England. And then the manufacturer decided to change the design of the valve and go with a battery operated, some different type of battery backup. Well, then that's when they went to England to get that changed, and it's on a boat somewhere. So
Maybe it stopped.
we
But our,
deal with a local company, but they get it from,
but our purchase order and the amount of money we're paying for it is still okay.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that hasn't changed, but, and we plan on going out again, November to rebid the project. Hopefully the valve will be there sometime before we go to bid. But the sad thing about this is we had an excellent price for the interior coating.
Yeah.
It was $440,000, a lot of money, but the cost per square foot was really good.
Yeah.
I don't think we're gonna see that again. So. And then with the 1 million gallon reservoir, again, the interior coatings beginning to fail, corrosion on ladder supports and rafters. It also does not have the seismic valving. So. Distribution system. You have inadequate fire flows. And the other concern with your distribution system is the amount of asbestos cement pipe. Over time, asbestos cement pipe gets weak, it softens, starts failing. You have 48%, almost 49% of your system is asbestos cement.
Oh,
So
that hurts.
we modeled your distribution system with your current piping. And, red is not good. Red means you're below 1,000 gallons per minute. Typically for residential areas, you want a minimum of 1,500, which is the yellow color. So with the modeling, once we found out where the problem areas are, we looked at upsizing pipes that would change this map. And I didn't put it in the presentation tonight, but the increasing pipe sizes, looping your pipes, changes that considerably.
Good.
Future water demand, you can see 2021, we list the number of values. The one that's really everything's sized on is MDD, maximum day demand. So in 2021, you had 152,000 gallons. And 2041, we're projecting 1,141,840 gallons. So not a huge increase. Partly because Portland State, and we use Portland State because that's what DEQ requires us to do on the sewer side. Portland State has you at a growth rate of 0.7%. You wouldn't think it right now because,
No.
there's construction everywhere,
Yeah,
but
eventually
for
we'll run out of
0.7 over the years, they have you at 0.7.
I did interject just a second. So one issue there is, of course, with the number of second homes being built in Bandon, second homes that are not vacation rentals, we have to size our system for the number of
Right.
homes that are built,
Right.
whether someone's living there or not. So we've had the situation where our growth in dwelling units is far higher than our growth in people, but we are required by state law to base most of our planning efforts on the population growth. There's a little bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And also, we're looking at the city decreasing their water losses from 13% down to 10%. Water Resources Department targets 10%. They want cities to get to 10%. And by putting in valving, the flow meters at the plant, changing out your individual meters to the residents, making sure they're accurate, we think you can get down to 10%. The need for raw water supply. Berry Creek flows reported between 1977 and 1981. They had a recording of 0.4 CFS. The 2041 projected maximum day demand is 1.1 CFS. But then you look at 94 through 96, the CFS, lowest recorded CFS is 2.4. Excuse me, is 1.4 between 94 and 96 and 2.4 between 2017 and 2021. So those two values are okay, but we do have the lower flows back in the late 70s, early 80s. 10 CFS is needed within Ferry Creek to provide fish passage. Augmenting low flows during dry months would benefit the water quality for aquatic life and increasing flow depth and reducing river temperatures. That really comes from the off-channel storage, because with the off-channel storage, you have 100 acre-feet. 25% of that, when you use any of the water, if you build it and use any of the water from that reservoir, 25% of the water you're using has to go back into Fairy Creek. So they look at it as helping the fish and aquatic life.
So you kind of pause you and just highlight something really quick, because I think this is a great opportunity to kind of clarify some misunderstandings within the community. So your first bullet point is really critical,
Mhm.
that it was only in that period of the late 70s and early 80s that the creek became low enough to cause a problem, even with growth. And one key factor there is that I don't believe that the city of Bandon, which has the senior water right on the creek, did what's called call its water right. When you call your water right, you call Water Resources and say, we're not getting enough water. They go out and shut other folks down. So clearly we have an issue that we need to plan for. And none of us can predict that it won't happen next year, right? But if you look historically, there's enough water and there's enough water in the creek, particularly if we end up having to call our senior water rights. We actually now have 20 years of data. We've been looking at both demand data and creek flow data. So I just want to set people's minds a little bit at ease about this situation. I just think there's a little bit of
Yeah.
I can't think of a good word. Gossip's not a good word, but
Paranoia.
Lack of water.
or just misinformation out
Lack of
there
knowledge,
about
yeah.
the or lack of knowledge about the amount of water that we
Yeah.
have. So I think that was a critical point. I wanted to make sure we emphasized it. Thank you.
And I have to admit that in the 2020 draft plan, I stated that there was a senior water right downstream from your low water pump station. There is not. So we changed it in this.
Good.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
And
Glad you found it.
Yeah, I finally figured that one out after 15 years. But the other key again is you can use the fish hatchery water right after they use it. And that's huge. The only time the city doesn't use that, if they need to use that water, is when they clean their pens and they put some chemical in the water. So it's like a day or two where you can't use that water. But for the most part, it's a very reliable source.
And they let us know so that we'll make
Yes,
sure our storage
If they're
tanks are
treating
full.
their fish for some sort of I forget the icky, whatever disease,
Yeah, yeah.
which isn't very often, but who knows? The fish hatchery, from what I'm,
Might
Great.
even be history.
might not even be there.
True, true.
Well, not good, but
So then the last bullet item is under drought conditions. You only have 1.7 days worth of storage in Fairy Creek and Geiger Creek. That's a whole nother chapter because at one point the city was looking at dredging those two reservoirs out. But then the state said, or ODF and W said that they own the dams and the dams were unsafe and they didn't want you to do anything back there. But since then, that's changed too.
Good.
So
Back.
It depends on who you ask at ODF and W, but we're talking to them on a pretty regular basis. We've actually now started a conversation with the regulatory agencies about what it would take to get the Fairy Creek impoundment dredged out. The
Yep.
thing about it is if you just sort of look at a profile of it, it doesn't, there's not a lot of head. In other words, it's not holding a lot of water back in the structure.
Right.
But there's a little bit of sort of the engineers and the fish biologists and hatchery operators within that organization don't always see head to head about things. But the great thing about the Fairy Creek impoundment for us is that operationally, it would make a huge difference. While it's only a couple of days worth of water, that'll fill up overnight, right?
Yeah.
And if we ever have to turn the pumps down, it'll refill during the day. And what that means is we would not have to operate the plant potentially 24/7,
Okay.
which is obviously a cost and staffing issue for the people of Bandon. So thanks, Steve.
And to get some idea of the siltation that's in Fairy Creek and Geiger Creek, look at the latest Google pictures.
Mhm.
It's very obvious. Fairy Creek's more affected than Geiger
Than
Creek,
Geiger.
but it's very obvious. There is not a lot of storage there.
Yeah.
Okay, for the off-channel storage option, we would take water from your low water pump station, pump up to it's hard to see, but in the lower left-hand corner, there's would be the storage area, 100 acre-feet. right there. And then during low flow conditions, you feed back to the low water pump station that would pump to the middle pond. And then you also have the 25% that goes back into Ferry Creek. So available storage with the off-channel reservoir, you get 38.2 additional days of storage plus 1.7, so you have 39 days of storage. And I would think if you have to use that storage, you would also implement
Oh, absolutely.
those on your water conservation management plan. There's 4 steps that you would implement to reduce water
Yeah.
usage.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and then 2022, Affirm GSI Water Solutions out of Portland came down and did a preliminary investigation for groundwater wells. And they're looking at a 30-day target for capacity of 300 to 500 gallons per minute total, which means somewhere between 75 and 100 gallons per minute per well, and up to 6 wells would be included.
Oh.
There's some permitting concerns. Well, first, is the water available?
Yeah.
That, based on their analysis of subsurface conditions, they think there is.
Okay.
There's basin rules that they have to follow. There's, if the wells are productive, then you're gonna have to transfer some of your water rights to the wells. It's not transferable back, but you wouldn't use all your water rights that you have for the wells, just a portion of them. And then you have to be concerned about if you draw the water, 300 to 500 gallons per minute out of the ground, how is that going to affect surrounding wells?
Yeah.
So they came up with a map, next slide. And it's hard to see, but you see there's green dots toward the top of the shaded area. They're up.
Not really.
They're up there. And then there's blue dots. And then there's orange dots.
Yes,
Okay,
the orange dots.
okay.
So 3 different options for well locations, the green dots being the least expensive, the orange dots being the most expensive. And when we did our cost estimates in comparison, we used the orange dots.
Okay.
So when you see the cost between the well study versus the off-channel storage, it's huge. But there's still, as part of the priority 1 improvements, there's still about $360,000 needed to continue on to see if the wells are viable.
Oh,
Mhm.
So that would include actually drilling a test well.
Hmm.
As far as your water rights, this slide, the first bullet is only half right. The city does have an extension they have to submit by October 1st. That extension is because the water meters have not been installed at the pump stations. But that extension, once the water meters are installed and it's part of your improvement plan, it changes the use of the water from Geiger Creek from domestic to municipal.
Okay.
So technically, right now, you're in violation of using that water because it's domestic. Even though it's used for domestic.
Yeah,
So there isn't the transfer of water to the off-channel storage. That is incorrect. But when we gave this to the city, I noticed that afterward, there wasn't time to change it. So anyway, that was wrong. Second one, there is still 2 orders waiting for Water Resources Department comments. And they say they're waiting on ODF and W, but that's to allow for the off-channel storage and also the usage of the off-channel storage. So have no idea when those orders would be coming down. But in the meantime, let's check on the groundwater.
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So priority 1 improvements. These are projects that include improvements to maintain the quality of the system. We want to keep your system as operational as possible. We're concentrating on mainly the treatment side. And when you look at the projects, Includes the flow meter for the filter to waste line. The sunshade for the filters, the PLC modifications, improvements. Replacing the flooring in the island in the water treatment plant. Backup generator system, we're working on that right now. Originally, we planned on 3 different generators, one for the lower pump station, middle pump station, and water treatment plant. And then discussions with staff, it made more sense to have just one generator that will supply power to the water treatment plant, middle pump station, lower pump station, low flow pump station, fish hatchery. So
Okay.
we're in the works on that one. The existing raw water clarifier replacement,
Yeah.
that's another one.
In layman's terms, since you're the engineer, what regulations did they change to turn this into a, what, huge project, very expensive project? Something to do with the foundation?
They changed the structural code such that there is not a glass fused to steel manufacturer that will tackle that connection where the steel comes in contact with the concrete. They're saying the only way they can meet the current code is to put a steel flooring in it. Well, when you put a steel floor in, that eliminates the chance of having a hopper bottom that we need for the clarifier.
Yeah.
So that means you have to go concrete. The difference between the original clarifier that was, designed and built versus having that same structure as concrete is about $1.3 million. And so Oregon State changed the code. They didn't consider the effects of it. Oregon State is one of the few people that are enforcing that code. We did ask, actually the structural people in Salem, if we could build it like to the code that the existing one was built. No, there's this new code. You got to follow the new code.
Even
though we got the bonds out for it ahead of time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's ridiculous.
Because when they review the plans, they're going to review it according to existing code. They went, you already got a tank there. That's operational. It's going to be fine. And all the other glass fused steel tanks had just the concrete floor. It didn't matter if it was a hopper bottom or not. They had the concrete floor. Now you're going to have to put in a steel floor, and then potentially where you have supports and stuff, you got to put concrete in the bottom. So
Oh, Jesus.
it really, and why the manufacturers will not address that connection, I think it's something to do with their concern about liability.
No, sure they are.
And because Oregon is one of the few states, I can't say the only, but one of the few states that has this new structural code, they're not gonna put any money toward it to try to figure it out.
No. Why would they?
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't need to.
they leave it up to all those small
Like
cities.
more
So is there
people-
any kind of a workaround at all?
We're working on it to see if we can get any political leverage to help us. I think the other thing that would be to go back, since it happens to be the same division of the state. I think there's a pretty good argument for the city of Bandon to go to the state of Oregon and say, you guys just cost us $1 million.
Yeah,
You're handing out a lot of money right now for
They
water infrastructure. Why don't you help us out?
yeah.
So that's the plan.
Okay.
Yeah. So we will go back out for bids for the 2 million gallon reservoir for the seismic and the interior coating. And the middle pond,
That can't be done separately, right?
well, see that you have a couple conditions. One is you gotta shut down the reservoir. They're gonna have to cut a hole in the side because we have to have the pipe that comes out of the reservoir coming out the side instead of the bottom. So the thought is, since that reservoir is down, you gotta cut a hole in it. That allows the painting contractor to come in and do his work.
Right.
But then we only have the window of pretty much March to the end of May
Yeah.
to complete that. So the thought is you do it together, it should save some costs, and we bid them together, but we had 2 different contractors. So. And then you have the pump stations, the middle pond, lower pond, you have those improvements to do with the flow meters and the standby power. And then the groundwater supply analysis continuation, which I think is a key.
Yeah.
We need that,
Yes.
we need to know for sure,
We do.
is there water or not?
Yeah.
And we also explored, thanks to the city manager, he was in contact with ODF and W. Simpson Creek, because you have water rights at Simpson Creek. Well, the last time they measured it was last month, was 0.1 CFS,
Yeah.
Oh,
not enough water.
no,
So that one's out.
yeah.
So then when you look at costs, you have a total cost of $9 million. The groundwater supply, 337,500. That's to deal with Water Resources Department, find out definitively what they're gonna require. And also to drill a sample well to see if you can get the water out of there.
Yeah.
And then you have the water treatment plant for the building and other improvements there is 598,000. The backup generator system is 1.3 million. Clarifier jumped 1.3 million to 3 million total. The 2 million gallon water storage tank improvements, we're estimating now is gonna cost a little over 2 million instead of, was it gonna be 4 or 5, about 750,000.
Yeah.
We're seeing construction costs go up 15% a month. And then you have the pump station improvements. So you have a total of a little over $9 million.
Mhm.
Of that 9 million, you have the bond issue of a little over 3 million.
Mhm.
So when we look at financing, we take the 3 million off it, but it's still, I'll get into it when we,
Yeah.
some other issues with
Mhm.
financing these projects.
Oh,
the
yeah.
way- Because of the way the city is set up.
Yep.
Priority 2 is strictly off-channel storage versus groundwater supply. So when you look at the cost difference. Yeah, hopefully there's water there for the groundwater,
Yes.
save a bunch of money. And again, that's the worst case. If we take the green dots,
It's cheaper.
cheaper by about half. So.
I'm sorry, I can't see those numbers. Is that 8.3?
Eight million, 342,000, the other is 3,605,000 and change.
And that number, the 3.6 is based on the orange dots.
Correct.
Okay.
And that, so the issue there is the green dots are much closer to other domestic wells.
Wow.
So the next thing that's going to happen with the groundwater project is we're going to meet with the state and ask them what happens?
Yeah.
Because we're fairly certain that the studies are going to show that we're going to interfere with some wells. Now, fortunately, they're located in places where the city could mitigate by hooking those folks up to city water.
Oh, okay.
But we don't know yet how the Water Resources Department is gonna take a look at that. So that's the next, that's been the next step. I mean, the passage of the TLT increase, which is a little more general fund money now, is going to allow us to move forward with some of that work.
That's good.
So.
There's also another little snafu, the main engineers for the groundwater study, they're working for GSI, quit. So,
Of course.
so but I don't think it's really gonna affect us because we can pick and choose now. They form a different company, so we can use that company for some things and use whoever's best in water rights, so we can pick and choose. Priority 3 improvements mainly deals with your distribution system. To bring up your fire flows, get rid of the AC piping,
Yeah.
and the price tag is large.
Astronomical.
14,800,000.
Mhm.
So obviously, we are not recommending the city do a $14 million project, but this
Glad to
is
hear that.
something that you need to work on with time, do a little bit at a time. Get
We
rid of
have a
that AC
benefactor
pipe.
for 30 million.
Yeah.
And we can consider this project.
Yeah, so it's a lot of money, but it's also something to consider a little bit at a time. Again, it's priority 3, so we put it at the end of the list. I think there's other more important projects that need to be completed before this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some of these things that are going to be demand driven or growth driven are the kinds of things that you would pay for from systems development charges.
Yep.
So if council gets the ability to set those charges, you would take some of these projects and fairly allocate them between what should existing residents pay for and what should new development pay for.
Yep.
And then you set your systems development charges for what new development should pay for. And you can do that in a district by district fashion. So you can have sub districts for your STC. So if there's a particular area where fire flows are low and it's the same area where a lot of new development is going, that new development can pay for a larger percentage of whatever local improvements need to happen. So if we need to have a new tank on South Beach Loop and we have a development coming forward that has 350 potential homes south of Bandon, well, that's then you do that math.
All right.
And it comes into your SDCs, and that way your existing residents aren't paying for
Yes.
for
A
new
lot of that. So with some of that new development, they're gonna have to increase line sizes so they can get the flow. They have to pay for that. That may mean going back on your existing system farther than what they want to do. But then they also are gonna have to loop the system, so it's just gonna help improve things.
All right.
I'm not gonna go through this map. It just shows where the proposed new lines are, and you got a bunch of stuff there at the water treatment plant. But this is in the plan. You can see where all the proposed projects are.
Yeah.
Okay, equivalent dwelling units. Before I get into financing, when you look at dealing with the state and rural development, they have a problem with Reedsport, Bandon, where the council cannot increase user fees
Right.
without the vote of the people. So, and that's partly why you had the 2019 bond issue, so you can get, you can get some money, but without being able to raise rates, they're not very favorable in wanting to look at funding packages.
Well, when the original water committee went to Roseburg and we met with the feds, DEQ, and someone from the state. And they basically sat there and said, we cannot help you. Every
Right.
grant is a loan attached. We can't give you anything and you can't qualify for a loan because you can't raise rates.
You can't guarantee that you can cover the debt.
Exactly.
So in Reedsport's case, because we're also city engineer there, I'd say 25 to 30% of the system is metered, the rest of it's unmetered.
Right.
If they're gonna get any kind of funding from the state or federal government, they have to agree to meter everybody.
Yeah.
So that's a big issue with them. And they're under the same thing where they have to get the vote of the people to raise rates. So we went through the exercise so you could see what kind of impacts it would have on your user fees. And so when you look at equivalent dwelling units, technically you have 2,704. But when you look at the funding agencies, they use a different per connection usage. So it drops down to 2,495 or 94, which actually is in your benefit because you have less EDUs. That means the user fee per month, when they look at it, is going to be higher. And the higher the rate, the more grants you get.
Mhm.
So your current rates, based on average water consumption of 3,500 gallons per residential unit, is $36.60. And that includes a 10% utility fee for inside users or accounts only. Commercials, 57.62. Obviously, you have hotels and other things where their rate's a lot higher, so just across the board. And then outside users, they do pay a higher rate, but they don't have the utility fee. $49.39 for residents and $78.14 for commercial. And then we looked at 3 different funding programs. So the first one was rural development, where you get 25% grant, 75% loan. They have a term of 40 years, and a lot of communities like that 40-year period because it reduces your monthly user fee. Interest rate of 2% would increase your cost per EDU of $5.40. Then you have the water wastewater financing where you get $750,000 in grant. 5.1 million in loan. Their interest rate is a little higher, their term's a little less, and so it raises the rate by $8.60. And then if you went clean water state revolving loan fund, it's all loan for 30 years at 1%, increases it at $7.65. So based on, again, not the full 9 million, it's only the 9 million minus the 3. Based on that and the increase per rates, your monthly user fee would go up to $53.13.
Up from 36.60.
Correct. But I think there's also something else in this slide that's kind of a red flag. Look at your 2022 and 2023 operational O&M budget. And that shows, based on the 2,400 EDUs, that shows your monthly user fee should be at $45.87.
Right now.
Yes. So there's the potential that you're losing money on the water side.
Mhm.
That we have authority to raise up there to that?
No,
No.
Oh.
no, you don't need that. There's the problem. You don't have the authority to raise your rates. But I think what this shows, and this isn't a true rate study, but what it shows is you really, with the average rate of $36, you really need to be about 45. Somewhere in between there.
Mhm.
So. Okay, I'm starting the truck remotely now. So then we also look at affordability. And if the rate was at $53.13 per month, that puts you at about 1.7%. We try to stay below the 2% of your median household income. So even with the raise, it would be considered affordable. And that's another parameter that the funding agencies look for.
Right.
So. Okay, enough bad news. So recommendations is to adopt a plan. Water Resources Department is looking for a plan. Because you have to have, I mean, your old plan that was approved is getting to the 20-year life, so you need a new plan. Be secure funding for priority 1 improvements, obviously constructive improvements. Certainly with priority 2, once we get more information, be able to assess which way to go on that one. And that's probably, to get that information, you're probably looking at a couple of years. And then you'll have priority 3 forever, so.
At 14 million, yeah.
Yeah, so.
14 million now,
That's true.
right.
That's true.
Wait,
at about
wait,
15% next year,
Yeah.
15% the
Yep.
year after that.
Yep.
It is amazing the construction costs and where it's going.
Oh, I know, it's
Yes.
crazy.
It is insane. And besides the cost, availability.
Yeah,
So even if,
Big thing.
as we saw with the seismic valve,
yeah.
and that's a pretty small item.
Yeah.
So I have no idea what schedules in construction anymore. Availability. We are also on the reservoir project. We are going out for quotes for all the pipe fittings required. So we can get that ordered, get that delivered to the city before we start construction too, so. And they'll quote you a price for a day. It'll last one day,
A day.
A day, yeah.
one day. Wow. And we've seen on projects where they've already, we've bid the project, we awarded the project. And then the suppliers come back and they want another 10% or 15%.
Yeah.
Even once they agreed to the price. So,
And you're stuck.
yes,
What else you gonna get?
right.
Yep.
Yeah, the bids are gonna go out, we think in the next month on the electrical work. The backup generator system, we actually went ahead and had our new electrical system engineers help us design that, because it's actually gonna feed, rather than having a generator feeding each little pump,
One big.
we're gonna feed that whole
That whole area.
chunk of the system, right? That whole end of the system will be fed from one large generator, which operationally is just so much better because
Oh,
you got to
yeah.
start them up and run them
Sure.
from time to time. But anyway, the bids for that are going to go out soon.
Good.
But it's, I think we're hearing at least a year on getting the generator. Once it goes out, it'll be at least a year to get the generator.
It is 16 months.
Oh,
Okay.
good Lord. Well, Steve, thank you for all your work.
Okay.
You
Thank-
know,
Thank you for
expected-
listening.
I expected everything that came in that,
Yeah.
that master plan. So,
Anybody have any questions? More
Madam
questions?
Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 22-19, adopting the water system master plan.
second,
Been moved and seconded to adopt the water system master plan. All in favor? Unanimous.
Great. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, now where are
Okay.
we?
Consent agenda, right?
$30 million in water improvements.
Yep.
So
I need a
anybody
benefactor.
have
Anybody
any-
want to volunteer?
Well, it's a good thing we're entertaining tax abatements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
That was a great
didn't say that out loud.
statement.
Didn't say that out loud.
I love it. Anybody have anything? There was a couple of things.
The barn and the,
Yeah, the barn and the Sprague. I'm hoping that we can get more. I'd like a narrative. I know we asked Jeff and I don't know that Jeff ever got the message, but I'd like to see, in addition to the calendar, I'd like to see a narrative of what they think is happening there, what needs to be there. And I noticed that on the 20th of August, where it just says Memorial Pam, well, I happen to have been there. And what it doesn't say here is that there were two things booked in at that exact same time. And each one of them got half of the space, apparently, that because it doesn't show here that there was a baby shower in the other half of the room. So we were in a room that said 69 people on the wall, and they were wall to wall people. Fortunately, I was sitting at the table with the fire chief, and so he was there. But he was, it was Larry Sabin, the head of the fire district board, whose memorial it was. And it was really, there were hundreds of people there. And somehow I talked to Pam and she said, well, they basically reserved the entire thing, but somebody, and I believe it was the former manager, booked the other side. So it was bad. And I'd like to see, and I contacted him to see if I could ask questions about it, and he never responded to me. So apparently, anyway, I would like to see more information from.
Well, I was there at a funeral the other day and I don't see anything here, but maybe it was set up before after this was printed. So I'm waiting to see
might
if
have
it's
been,
going to be.
Oh,
more.
yeah, you were there. That was,
yeah.
Loopy's reception. That was,
okay,
yeah, I'm thinking
Okay.
it was printed before she was there.
okay. The library board, are they only meeting once every 2 months? Is that what it is? And it's not called the library board anymore. It's the library advisory board.
Mhm.
That's correct.
What does that mean?
That was a change that we made in early 2020.
To change everything to
We
advisory?
changed the names of most of those advisory boards and commissions to reflect that they were in fact advisory to the city council.
You're right.
Oh, yeah.
You're right.
They were not, and that they were not true, because there was confusion at the
Yes, there
time,
was.
about whether they were the governing board or whether
There
you were
definitely was.
where the buck stopped.
Okay,
So those names were all changed in 2020.
okay,
Good.
Okay.
good. Anybody have anything else that they want to? I do notice here, Dana's report. I hope everybody reads these,
Yes.
like particularly the planning department report.
Mhm.
Where I think it mentions that, an application for a new grocery outlet has come in, and that's what everybody's waiting for. It's been 2 years, I guess, we've been discussing it, or a year and a half. So that's good news, and maybe we can share that with the community. Anybody have anything else before we
Move to approve the consent agenda.
been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda? All in favor? Unanimous. Okay, now we've come down to the point for public comment. So if anybody's here who has been here that wants to speak to the public, now is your turn. Yes, come on up.
Denise Frazier, 1259.
Wavecrest Lane Southwest. The good news is I'm not going to talk about anything quite so serious as Steve talked about.
Right, yeah, right.
And, but I am going to address VRDs.
Okay.
And I'll let you decide if that's either good or bad. Okay? But I understand you're having a workshop coming up along with the Planning Commission, and this will be part of your discussion. So I encourage you to reach agreement to amend the unintended consequences created by the 2018 text changes to the VRD ordinance. Specifically to include all the grandfathered non-conforming VRDs in the saturation ratio calculation when a new application is up for consideration. We have neighborhoods in the CD zones that are now facing up to a 40% saturation ratio of VRDs to single-family residences because of the loophole the text change created. Additionally, I don't know why I'm nervous.
Don't be.
Don't be nervous.
Try not to. Additionally, I propose a review of the formula used to calculate the saturation ratio. The current methodology disregards the applicant property in the calculation, which can result in a greater than a 30% ratio. The two VRDs recently approved on Cleveland Street is an example of that. There are,
Yeah, two.
Two?
Yes.
Did you say two?
there's a second one was approved
Yeah.
at the last planning
Last
commission.
planning commission meeting.
Really?
Yep.
So-
Whoa.
So you need to read the minutes.
Well, I did read the minutes, but
So there are 5 homes on Cleveland Street. And in the 5 homes, 2 of those now are VRDs. And if you do the math, that's a 40% saturation ratio. And that happened because the applicant's residence was removed from the calculation. It's neither a nominator or a denominator. So I think I'm hoping that you revisit that and also close that little loophole. So the intention of the calculation ratio in the VRD ordinance is to prevent forming VRD neighborhoods and to minimize the impact of VRDs have on the existing homes in the CD zones. And so I sincerely hope you adopt measures to put us back on course regarding the VRD ordinance, so it remains true to the intentions which it was created. Thank you.
Would you make sure we get a copy of that
Yes,
too,
please.
Denise, please?
I did. I brought 16 copies.
Good, well,
Yes,
please, I
thank
would
you.
love, I would love
Thank
to have
you.
one. Okay. Anybody else wish to address the council?
Yes, please. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. My name is Bill Frey and I live at 1235 Wavecrest Lane here in Bandon. And I appreciate speaking to you tonight. There's 2 issues that I'd like to discuss. One is the speeding citations that have been issued this year. A great job, I believe, by the police department. The issue was, I was speaking with a friend down in Port Orford, and he brought up the fact that his understanding was that the council down there had found out that the processing of their speeding tickets wasn't being done diligently. And when they rectified that situation, they found an unexpected consequence of $200,000 in revenue. So that brought up a question tonight, since we have seen quite a large increase in the number of speeding tickets this year. Is there a monthly or quarterly report that the public can access that shows the source of the funds that go into the general fund? Or if not, do we have an audit? And this might be for Mr. Chandler. Do we have some sort of an audit program here at the city that ensures that the speeding citations are being collected and processed diligently?
There's a report that I review every month on all of those things. I mean, the overall funds get audited once a year, but I also on a daily basis see the giant whiteboard inside June's office, our city recorder's office, where every ticket is written down
Okay,
in columnar format and processed. So we're doing a
great. Okay,
good success with collections, and
super.
balls are not getting dropped. We actually have 3 people working on
Great.
that.
That's
Two-
great.
2 people working on it right now.
Because I don't believe we've added any staff, and I know the number of tickets has gone from what, 2 or 3
From
to
2 to
140.
140.
So worried that there wasn't staff.
But
or-
June is the equivalent of more than one.
Wow.
staff.
outstanding. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And the other issue I just want to, I'll just tag on to Denise's comment in the work session that's coming up. Would appreciate that there is a priority given. I know you have a lot of items on the agenda. Appreciate a priority given to looking at the way the VRD saturation rates are currently calculated and modifying that ordinance so that all VRDs are counted, including non-conforming, and that the saturation rate calculation includes, as Denise pointed out, the subject property, because when it isn't, then you have a potential for a oversaturation, inadvertent oversaturation in a particular area, such as you mentioned Cleveland.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Oh, anybody up on Zoom want to address the council?
I guess I'll have to read some more tonight.
Nobody wants to? Okay.
What are you reading?
No, I was just wondering, Madam Mayor, the appointments to the Committee for Citizen Involvement. Is there any chance that when people are appointed to committees that they could come to the council so we could meet them?
I suppose.
And that
I mean,
brings
yeah,
up something
Bill,
for me
I mean,
too.
Bill's
Bill's
been,
nice, he's here.
Bill's been appointed, yeah.
Yes, but
We
there are
haven't,
others that,
well-
a situation happened at church that this man came. I said, are you new? He said, no, I thought he was a new member, but he'd been there for a long time, but nobody introduced him. Not that they would introduce him to me, but at least to let people know. So if I see somebody in the street and they said I'm on the council, like, or some committee and I wouldn't know them.
yeah, well, I mean, I don't think we know most of the people on the Parks and Rec Commission, actually.
Nope.
Well,
I mean, are you want
that
to?
was just a question. You don't have to do it.
Well, in the first place, a counselor is free to go to any of these meetings and meet the members of the commission.
Okay, good.
Jerry wants to go. Why didn't, maybe you
Fine,
could tell
I
her
might
when,
do that.
all right?
There you go, Jerry.
I know parks, but I know the people on the parks.
So now we're going to have council mayor staff remarks. Dana?
I'll just say that we could totally organize something to get all of our commissions or councils together.
Not
to
on
get
my
to know each
account,
other.
that's okay.
I think
Yes,
it's a
you
great
want
idea.
it.
I think it's good. Don't you think it's a good idea?
I think it's very nice.
There.
Thank you.
There you go.
Shayla? Dan?
I've got a couple things. Thanks to the voters for their support on the transient occupancy tax increase. We plan to put that money to good use and be very transparent about what we do with it. What we're looking at now to bring to council for some of the general fund portion is, there's been a lot of requests for a trolley. We're gonna go, we're pricing them out right now. We're looking at used ones. There aren't a lot of them around the country, and it seems like the ones that we find are in places like Florida and Virginia. But I've had many staff that have volunteered.
Yeah, right.
to Go to Florida and drive back. I told them they need to wear one of those old ice cream man hats though, while they drive.
Good humor.
In any event, there are a couple that look good, that look like they've got some life in them. We're looking for aluminum bodies that don't rust in this climate. All of the ones we're looking at are, of course, compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. That was the big issue with our existing trolley.
Okay.
We're also looking at near term doing some cleanup and dedicating some funds to the cleanup of Old Town, curb painting, sidewalk washing, just some general cleanup of the public spaces there. Again, this was about, making this a better town for visitors, which means it's a better town for all of us as well. I would note that we've signed the contract, which contract, right? I made a note to myself and I don't recall what it was. We sent the bid out for the electrical. I've already said that. And I guess that's all I'll say.
Okay. Brian?
I'm gonna start with Cranberry Festival. I heard a lot of really positive things about it and a lot of negative things about it. But just to keep it short, I think we really need to kind of split it up. As you pointed out in your column, just to prove that I do read your column. They used to, the Lions used to do the beef barbecue there for years.
Yeah.
So the food thing, I can, but this year the weather was exceptional. The crowds were huge. The parade was great. But I think that Old Town was kind of just dead. And it really, I don't think it would really hurt to move at least part of the festival, car show, whatever, down to Old Town.
Yeah, that's not
You
a
know,
bad
and
idea.
take some of the strain off, because I heard a lot of people complaining about they couldn't get food, they couldn't find a place to park.
I agree with
And
that
one,
part of it.
couple even told me they'll never come back if it's up there again. They said, well, I hope, that you will come back, but I'm sure the other guys will have something to say about it, but I thought it was successful, very successful. But I really think we need to move part of it back to Old Town. That's it.
Well, somebody else will talk about the Cranberry Festival, but I had occasion to go to the coronation of the Queen. And it was a lovely ceremony. The master of ceremonies was great, and the princess and the Queen did absolutely beautifully. And I'm very proud of them, and I'm sure their parents are too. They did the city good.
Cranberry Festival. Mom was very pleased to be the co-grand marshal of the parade. She was a little disappointed that she didn't get to see all of the parade.
Yeah, we didn't get to see it.
No, we didn't get to see any of it, but she had a lot of fun. She was up at the park for 3 hours, I think it was. We were there or something like that.
I think so.
She was exhausted when we got home, but she had a great time. I heard all of the people that contacted me were all negative about the park, the parking especially. It was dirty, that kind of thing. I thought it was great.
I did too.
I thought it was a great Cranberry Festival. I wish that there could have been a few more food trucks because the lines were so long. In fact, Mary and I we had a scone because there was no line. That's all we ate, But other than that, I think they did a great job. Parking, of course, we all know about that one. And I would love to hear from anybody out there that wants to call me. We heard while we were there that the traffic jam going to the park on 11th backed up to the hospital. So if you were a part of that, I would love to know.
It was backed up for
Because,
sure.
of course, we didn't see it. I'm sorry.
Was it during the parade time? That's the only way.
No, there was
After
after.
the parade as everybody's trying to leave downtown.
Mary's
was
contact
back
came
up.
in just as the princesses were walking into the food court area. So the parade had to be over with the princesses there. So, other than that, that's it, I think. And thank you, Steve. Even though it's all bad news,
Yeah.
everyone needs to know that bad news.
I agree. I think the festival association with as limited a few people as they have working on it, I think they did an excellent job. And yes, good things have been better. The parking, there was an area there that should have been set aside for handicapped parking. But I believe they didn't have the sign in time. At least the sign wasn't there when we got up there, and that could have saved some of the problems. And next year, if we have a trolley, I think that we could use the trolley to shuttle people from back and forth. And people would just feel better if they don't think they have to drive round and around and around to find a parking spot. And older people, I know for sure, older people are like me, we're not going to walk blocks. Younger ones, yeah, they'll walk from the school or wherever, but actually, and I think Brian has a good idea, maybe something like the car show could be downtown, split it up some. But I thought they did a good job, and people that I talked to seemed happy with it. I did see one thread on Facebook about the political signs of the political groups that were in the parade, and they were all focused on one political party, but the other political party was in the parade too. So, and I mean, when you get right down to it, with Madeline and I writing, if you say no politics, then maybe we shouldn't be writing either. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't know where to draw the line. So
And we purposely don't put signage on the car we're in.
we don't, so they don't know who we are.
Way back, way,
They don't know who we are. We're just two women riding in the parade.
Throwing candy.
way back in the early 80s, when I ran for city council, I did the cleanup after the equestrian units.
Oh, yeah, that
And
was,
it had a sign on my wheelbarrow that said, vote for Vic on each side.
Oh,
If I hadn't done that, I don't know who would have,
yeah.
but politics is politics,
Yeah.
get over it.
I will say that somebody, I think it was Loria Arnold, posted the entire regulations for the parade and it said, you will not throw anything from a moving
Oh, I know,
vehicle.
I know.
I mean, we would be arrested and in jail because we threw so much
We
candy.
must have thrown at least.
So anyway,
Yeah.
but I thought the parade, I thought the whole festival went well and
Yeah.
the weather Saturday was beautiful, not so much yesterday. Now, if it had been today, there'd have been, it was
Oh,
beautiful
yeah.
today, but you cannot depend on the weather. Peter?
I would just like to take a moment to thank our volunteer of the month, once again. As far as the Cranberry Festival, I would encourage those that have comments, criticism, feedback, to get involved in helping implement that festival. If you'd like to see changes, please get involved and help promote that, help provide support, because it's a tireless job. It really is. It takes a lot of work to do that festival. So Ryan, you're we're gonna expect you on the equestrian cleanup next year. Go ahead.
I'll echo what Peter said exactly. I think it's late January, early February, that they start having the meetings for that.
Yes.
So,
Get
get
involved.
involved. That's,
Yeah.
they're hurting for people to be involved. So if you didn't like what was happening, get involved.
Good point.
Oh, and one more thing, the VFW Craft Fair and Bake Sale was extremely successful this year. And the breakfast, everyone
Delicious.
was,
The pancakes were great.
oh, did you
Oh,
go?
yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I heard that the breakfast was
Oh,
good
it's good.
and there was a lot of people. So
In
the
fact, my
VFW thanks everyone in town and all the tourists that came by.
Good.
Because it
Mary, we had,
will help us
I think-
help veterans.
Denise had one more
Yeah.
follow-up comment.
Ask a question. I just wondered for the merchants, if it was better for you to have the festival up at the park, because I drove through town and it looked pretty busy to me.
Yeah.
No, you didn't get any foot traffic. I thought you might.
I did. I did as much business on a slow day in the winter time. No, wait, I can take it back. I did about as much business in the first 2 hours. It usually takes me a week in the winter time to do. And we were barely hanging on. I mean, it was, yeah, I almost had people starting to pass out because it was hot and, everybody was running. But once the parade started, they all got a chance, get some water and cool down. But it was crazy down there. Crazy.
He always has.
But that-
Business, I mean, to have the festival, no.
I can't really tell.
He always
It's
has money.
busiest day of the year, all the time. I mean,
He's always
So-
busy.
Yeah, but Chris, you're the bakery, so people are coming in there before they go to the parade.
But there were
That's true.
Yeah.
cars. There wasn't a place to park when we went down there.
Oh, wasn't there?
Oh,
Okay,
no, I mean, yeah, it
It
was,
was
Okay, good.
deserted, but it
Yeah.
had cars there.
okay, good.
Okay, anyway,
Let's wrap this up.
all right. And if anybody has any concerns, they can talk to the Bandon Chamber of Commerce because
Okay,
it was
good.
their Cranberry Festival, not the city of Bandon. And thank you, everybody. Yes.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Oh.
Oh, yes, thank you. Oh, is that? I don't